We start in Matthew 24. This stems from a little blog I put out yesterday called Christmas and Hanukkah Collide. Because this year, Hanukkah starts on December 25th, which is the same day as that other holiday that we don't celebrate. Hanukkah is a great thing to study, but for those of us who are Messianic or Church of God people, there really isn't a lot for us to do. It's not a festival from Leviticus 23. There's no commanded Sabbaths. Um, so this is the Feast of Dedication. That's what Hanukkah means, is important. And we do have record that Yeshua was at the temple for the Feast of Dedication. So we kind of assume that he was observing it or commemorating it. Otherwise, John probably wouldn't include that tidbit in his gospel. But Christianity and is really lacking because it doesn't generally study this out. Most people think of Hanukkah as a competing holiday with Christmas in the wintertime, and they talk about giving gifts and spinning dreidels and eating latkes and a miracle of oil, none of which shows up in the actual official record of Hanukkah. Not one of those things shows up. Hanukkah is a celebration of the cleansing of the temple after it was defiled by the Greeks. And it's a celebration of a liberation of Judea. And once they finally got the temple restored, they celebrated a feast like Sukkot for 8 days. And the leader of Israel at the time made a decree that they would do that every year to commemorate this victory and this restoration of Judea to following the Torah. And that's why it exists. And it happened about 250 years before the Messiah, which brings me here to Matthew 24. Is that big enough for you guys and gals?
I can see it.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
All right. So as I'm going through here today, we can just kick this one off as a discussion. Might get ahead of ourselves, might get behind. That's okay. This is really what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about Matthew 24 here, and then we're going to go to Maccabees, and we're going to just look at the first 4 chapters, which makes these verses right here make a lot more sense. This is where most of Christianity reads about the abomination of desolation and fleeing to the mountains. And they think when Yeshua spoke these words that this had never happened before, and it was something that was going to happen for the first time. In fact, I think when I read this the first time, I thought that this is something that's only going to happen one time at the end of the age. Oddly enough, as we sit here today, these things have happened twice now. And so there's a third time coming. Here in Matthew 24, we're going to do 15 through 20. Therefore, when you see, well, back up. They ask, when's he coming back? Right? Tell us when these things are coming and what will be the sign of your coming in the end of the age. And he answers that no one will mislead you. Many will come in my name saying, I'm the Messiah. They're going to lead many. Now, I'm the Messiah. They're going to mislead many. They are asking for a physical liberation of Judea from the Roman occupation. They are thinking that the Messiah is coming to be like this guy we're about to read about called Judas Maccabeus. They think that Yeshua is a contemporary military leader that is going to lead a revolt to push the Romans out of Judea and restore the Torah and restore order to the Holy Land. Now, they don't think that out of random. They think that because it happened 250 years prior. And so that's what they think is about to happen. And they don't understand that he's going to do that for the entire earth at the end of this age. When he came the first time, he came as a lamb and as a teacher. So he says, for many will come in my name saying, I'm the Messiah. They're going to mislead many. You will be hearing of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not frightened. Those things must take place, but that is not yet the end. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and in various places there will be famines and earthquakes. But all of these things are merely the beginning of birth pangs. They will deliver you to tribulation and will kill you, and you will be hated by all nations because of my name. Just remember these words when we get to the Maccabees, okay? Because these things happened before. He's reminding them of something. At that time, many will fall away and betray one another and hate one another. Many false prophets will arise and mislead many, because lawlessness is increased. Most people's love will grow cold. Really, just try to remember this stuff as we move on, because all of these things happen. The one who endures to the end, he will be saved. The gospel of the kingdom shall be preached to the whole world as a testimony to all the nations. Then the end will come. This part is the new stuff. That had never happened before. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. Whoever is on the housetop must not go down to get the things that are in his house. Whoever is in the field must not turn back to get his cloak. But woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing babies in those days. Pray that your flight not be in the winter or on a Sabbath. For them there will be a great tribulation, such as has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will. Okay, I wanted to stop there. Unless those days have been cut short, no life would have been saved. So from 15 to 20, right here, I got distracted, Don, because somebody named Palawan is Gail. Oh, that's Gail. All right. What's it? So these verses here we need to focus on as we move into First Maccabees. This is the new stuff. So, anybody have anything yet? Probably not. Okay. So before we get going, if you want to read this, and I highly recommend everybody read this for yourself. You get a Brenton translation of the Bible, which is the Greek Old Testament, which existed about 200 years before the Messiah. The Greek Old Testament is called the Septuagint, was translated into English by a guy named Lord Brenton, a British nobleman, and it's incredibly helpful tool for us. It's wonderful for us to be able to actually read the Bible of the first century and to read the Bible as it was understood 200 years before Yeshua. This is a great tool. Our Bibles, our NASBs and KJVs, are built on the Masoretic text. They were built on, which is the Jewish restoration of the Torah. That's made from about 800 AD. It's roughly 1,000 years younger than the Septuagint. And so if you get the Septuagint, it includes, if you get this Brenton, it includes these books in blue, which are not in our Old Testaments. These are called Apocrypha. They are books that the translators felt have value and have merit, but don't warrant being called scripture for one reason or another. For some reason, these books are not considered scripture by either, usually the Jews and Christianity, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm fine with the 66-book Bible. I wish 1 and 2 Maccabees was included, but it wasn't, so I move on. One of the reasons, there's 2 reasons that I could find as to why this was never considered canon or canonical by Jewish folks, by the rabbis. The first is that it was written in Greek, and they do not care for things that are written in Greek. They drew their line in the sand at Hebrew or Chaldee, Aramaic, because some of the book of Daniel was written in the Aramaic rather than Hebrew. They didn't include anything written in Greek in the Tanakh, or originally written in Greek. Now, things that were translated into Greek, they're fine with. The other thing is that it's very, very flattering of Alexander the Great. seems that a Jewish person would not like that, would not like the fact that the world turned Greek. So those are the only two reasons that I could find talking to mentors and looking on the internet as to why this was not made scripture. Generally speaking, 1 and 2 Maccabees are considered authoritative and accurate histories. 3 and 4 are not. So if you want to read about the Maccabean revolt and read about Hanukkah, I recommend 1st Maccabees and 2nd Maccabees. That's a lot. If you want to get the nitty gritty real quick, real fast, and understand Matthew 24 better, these first 4 chapters here, or what we're going to go through today, explain a lot about Matthew 24 and what the people were asking. So, one more note about these books. They are not written by the same person. So in our New Testament, when we have 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, and 1 and 2 Peter, those are letters that were written by the same person, just different letters to either the same group of people or different letters from the same person. In this case, all 4 of these books have different authors. So they're not written by the same person. They all tell the same exact story. So just keep that in mind if you do read them. The Brenton version of the Septuagint is what I gravitate to, what I like. There's a few others out there, more modern versions, but some of them actually make corrections to the text using the Masoretic text, and they're kind of mutts, they're kind of blends and stuff. I think this one is just fine, but it does use the old-timey King James type language sometimes, and that is kind of hard for some people to get their head around. Christians probably don't want these books to be canonical because of what we're going to talk about today. First Maccabees, Second Maccabees, these are very pro-Torah, pro-law, pro-commandment keeping, pro-Sabbath keeping books that make Jews out to be heroes that they literally are. It's a very, very favorable information to the Jewish people, which makes it frustrating that the Jews do not learn about Hanukkah from these books. The Jews learn about Hanukkah from the sages and from their oral record, their Talmudic resources. Okay. We're going to study this like it's scripture, even though it isn't. That's the format that came to me when I was preparing this. And so off we go. Verse 1 through 7. And it happened after that, Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Kittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, and he reigned in his stead, the first over Greece. And he made many wars and won many strongholds, and he slew the kings of the earth, and went through to the ends of the earth, and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up. And he gathered a mighty strong host, and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries to him. After these things he fell sick, and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable, and had brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. So Alexander reigned 12 years, and then died. So we start off with the wars and the rumors and wars. Wars all over the place. Alexander was a great military leader, brought the elephants in, and this is also fulfillment of prophecy of Daniel. We look at the figure that Daniel sees, the being that has the different substances that makes up the body parts. If you take that apart, you come up with this formula. I'm not terribly astute at that, but I've heard many a sermon that use Daniel to prove that Alexander the Great and the Grecian Empire split come from that vision. And his servants bare rule every one in his place. And after his death, they put all crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are around us, since we departed from them, and we have much sorrow. So the Greeks held power for 137 years. The apostasy of Judea did not happen overnight. This, I believe, is a mistake that most prophecy students think, that we're all going to march along exactly the same, and then boom, there's going to be, first beast, second beast, false prophet, 3.5 years, Yeshua's back, bada bing, bada boom. It's not how it has worked historically, probably not how it's going to work in the end times too. They had 137 years for Grecian paganism to saturate the world. When we go through this, you'll notice that these guys have Greek names. Maccabeus is not a Hebrew word to my knowledge. It means the hammer. These guys have the Greek culture in them, and this book was written in Greek so it could go to the whole world. Now, this is not necessarily bad, because Yahweh wanted the world. He raises up kings and he tears down nations. It's not like some kingdom could rise that he didn't want to happen. Nobody can thwart his will. When he wants something done, it's done. The entire world speaking Greek and being able to have a Bible written in Greek is part of his plan. And it saturates and it marinates over a couple hundred years. So when the Romans come into this part of the world, they bring their Roman stuff, but they adopt Greek ways too. They adopt Greek, they learn Greek, they study Greek. So the whole world has a singular language called Greek. And the Bible gets translated into Greek, and everybody gets to learn the Bible after the apostles go and spread the gospel from Mount Zion. So this is part of the plan, even though there's lots of bad things that happen here. This device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen, and they made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold into mischief. So the Greek culture was immersed in Judea, and the king of Judea allowed the people to adopt the Greek culture. It allowed the blending to come in. And so they build a gymnasium for Greek wrestling. And in order to do the Greek wrestling, they had to uncircumcise themselves to be like the Greeks. Now, if you're thinking, how does somebody uncircumcise themselves? You can search that one out on the internet on your own. Not a pretty sight. They really, really rejected the covenant at this point in time. The people would go to wrestle and work out completely naked. So this is the one place in history that I have found that makes sense for the circumcision covenant. Because if you think about it, that's a pretty private thing that happens on the 8th day of a boy's life, where the rabbi will circumcise him, or they would do it at the temple. And then the child will grow up, and nobody would ever have a cause to witness this mark until this moment in time. So you see that Yahweh works, he starts the covenant of circumcision with Abraham quite a while before this, for this moment in time, not exclusively, mind you, but this is a period of time where grown men, were known to take off their clothes in public and be that way long enough for people to realize whether they were circumcised or not. And the Jews would have stuck out because they were the only ones who had that. So they undid it in order to be part of the crowd. It's pretty bad. Think about when Yeshua is being murdered and they say, we have no king but Caesar. It's a very similar theme that's happening at this point in time. These people are rejecting the Holy Covenant in order to be part of the crowd. Very bad. So when the kingdom was established before Antiochus, he thought to reign over Egypt, that he might have the dominion of two realms. He entered into Egypt with a great multitude of chariots, elephants, and horsemen, and a great navy, and made war against Ptolemy, king of Egypt. But Ptolemy was afraid of him and fled, and many were wounded to death. Thus they got the strong cities in the land of Egypt, and he took the spoils thereof. So Antiochus goes off to war, North Africa, goes off to the Egyptian Empire. He's successful. He wins. He has enlarged his empire, and he comes home. After that, Antiochus had smitten Egypt, and he returned again in the 143rd year, and he went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude. Isn't that something? Isn't it something that the Jews were adopting the Greek culture, diluting their own culture? They were being tolerant. They were being accepting. They were adopting all these practices and blending them into their own ways, and it wasn't enough. Is it ever? Is it ever enough? From the 1960s until today, there's been a war on the American family. And if the people in the 60s knew where this slippery slope was going to go, they wouldn't have done it. But there's no amount of tolerance that's ever enough when people hate the God of Abraham. There's no amount of accepting the ways of the heathen that ever gets you welcomed into the club. Antiochus knew that the Jews they built a gymnasium. They built a gymnasium. His people had to have watched them uncircumcise themselves, but it wasn't enough. He comes back and he destroys Israel. He proudly entered the sanctuary, took away the golden altar, the candlestick of light. He put out the menorah. He turned it out. He took it away. All the vessels thereof, and the table of the showbread, and the pouring of the vessels. Also, he took the hidden treasures which he found. And when he had taken all away, he went into his own land, having made a great massacre, and spoken very proudly. Therefore, there was a great mourning in Israel where they were, so that the princes and elders mourned, the virgins and young men were made feeble, and the beauty of women was changed. The entire area got depressed. When they let the false gods and the heathen worship in, it was all fun and games, and everybody was happy, and we can all just get along. And now the temple is in ruins. The menorah is gone. The holy vessels are gone. The treasures are gone. And everybody is bummed. They realize that they got hoodwinked. Every bridegroom took up lamentation. She that sat in the marriage chamber was in heaviness. The land also was moved for the inhabitants thereof, and all the house of Jacob was covered with confusion. After 2 years fully expired, the king sent his chief collector of tribute into the cities of Judea, who came into Jerusalem with a great multitude, and he spake peaceable words unto them. But it was all deceit, for when they had given him credence, he fell suddenly upon the city and smote it very sore and destroyed much of the people of Israel. So this is the same cycle that we are in our lives today. When the people who make you change your ways and you change your ways, and then you're buddies for a little while, and then they make a big stink, and they come back, you apologize, and then it was all a lie. These guys came to collect the tribute with an army, and the Judeans were so depressed and just in despair that they believed it, and they got completely smoked. When he had taken the spoils of the city, he set it on fire, pulled down the houses and walls thereof on every side. But the women and children they took captive and possessed the cattle. Then builded they the city of David with a great and strong wall and mighty towers, and made it a stronghold for them. And they put therein a sinful nation, wicked men, and fortified themselves therein. They stored it with armor and victuals, food. And when they had gathered together the spoils of Jerusalem, they laid them there, so they became a sore snare. For it was a place to lie in wait against the sanctuary, and an evil adversary to Israel. Thus they shed innocent blood on every side of the sanctuary and defiled it. So understand what they did here, knowing that the Jews had the pilgrimage festivals and that the people would come from all over the world for the pilgrimage festivals. They set up a fortress in the city of David and lied in wait for anybody who could come all the way in there with their offerings and then killed them. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? That they're that wicked that they would actually allow people to get all the way through from wherever they came from Galatia, from wherever they may be, to take their pilgrimage, and they say, okay, let's wait till they get up to the temple, and then they would kill them. About as evil as it gets right there. It got so bad that the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled, because the city was made a habitation of strangers and became strange to those that were born in her, and her own children left her. Jerusalem became uninhabitable by God's people. Her sanctuary was laid waste like a wilderness. Her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into reproach, her honor into contempt. As had been her glory, so was her dishonor increased, and her excellency was turned into mourning. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed, according to the commandment of the king. Yet many also of the Israelites consented to his religion and sacrificed unto idols and profaned the Sabbath. So you see why we take the Sabbath so seriously. It's not just the Sabbath, it's the whole Torah, my friends. The adversary despises the Torah. He despises the ways of God. And yet we are supposed to understand that 200 years after this, the Messiah dies, is resurrected by God, and then all of this stuff is okay. That all of this here was just kabuki theater. That it would have been okay if these people adopted pagan ways and blended things and made up holidays and ate pork in the name of the Lord. It would be okay just 250 years later. It doesn't make any sense. That is incredibly difficult mindset for me to imagine. That Yahweh allowed all of his people to be slaughtered, but was going to make these things okay in the first century or the second century? I don't think so. The king had sent letters by messenger into Jerusalem and the cities of Judah that they should follow the strange laws of the land and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days and pollute the sanctuary of the holy people, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts, that they should also leave their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation, to the end that they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. And whosoever would not do according to the commandment of the king, he would die. In self-same manner wrote he to his whole kingdom and appointed overseers of all the people, commanding the cities of Judah to sacrifice city by city. So when they asked the Messiah, when is your day coming? And he says There will be wars and rumors of wars, and pray that your flight not be in winter or on the Sabbath. Guess what? This happened in the winter, and we're going to get to the Sabbath here in a second. It all had happened before. Oh, Marco's here. Polo. So in self-same manner, he appointed overseers to command the cities of Judah to sacrifice swine all over the place. Then many of the people were gathered unto them, to wit, everyone that forsook the law, and so they committed evils in the land, and drove the Israelites into secret places, even wherever they could flee for succor. I think that's for safety. The 15th day of the month Caslev, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation on the altar and builded idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side. The 15th day of Caslev is next Wednesday. In the wintertime, they set up the abomination of desolation on the altar, and they built idol altars throughout the cities of Judah in order to defile the entire land. And they burnt incense at the doors of the houses and in the streets. When they had rent in pieces the books of the law which they found, they burned them with fire. For those of you who just joined, we are going through First Maccabees in the Brenton version to talk about the real story of Hanukkah, because this is it. It's free for everyone to read. The text is blue on my screen because to indicate that this is not scripture. This is the Apocrypha. So we are reading First Maccabees as a history that is not included in a 66-book Bible because it's not scripture, even though I'm going through it like we're doing a Bible study. So whoever was found with the book of the testament, or if any committed to the law, the king's command, if anybody was committed to the law, meaning anybody keeping Torah, the king's commandment was that they should put him to death. I think we all better stock up on printed Bibles, because they went from house to house to find if anybody had the Torah or was following the Torah. The king's commandment was to put them to death. And again, the idea that the Messiah came to end the law is crazy when we understand how important the law was and is to the identity of God's people. Thus they did by their authority under the Israelites every month to as many as were found in the cities. You understand, they set up a routine to go force people to sacrifice to the false gods. And if they found any Torah or anything, they killed them. Same thing that happened with Herod and the youngsters, Herod when they tried to kill Yeshua, and what the Romans did. And we all understand something like this is going to happen worldwide before the return of the Messiah. Because the adversary has not given up. The adversary does not like the Torah. He does not like God's people, and he wants people to, if they're to either worship him or at least not worship Yahweh. And we know how to worship Yahweh. The Sabbath, the festival days, Leviticus 11, Leviticus 23, the clean and unclean food, and the way we treat each other, loving our neighbor as ourselves, is outlined in Leviticus 15. Loving God with all of our heart and our soul and our mind is the Shema. We know from Genesis to Revelation is applicable today and very important, as it was to the first century believers. Verse 58, thus they did by their authority unto the Israelites every month, as many were found into the cities. And now the 25th day of the month, they did sacrifice upon the idol altar, which was upon the altar of God, at which time, according to the commandment, they put to death certain women that had caused their children to be circumcised. What does Matthew 24 say? Woe to the women who are with child. Pray that your flight not be on the Sabbath, not be in the wintertime, the women and the children. This entire chapter is a prelude to what he's talking about before the end of the age. Same thing happened when the Romans took over Judea, and it took them 5 years to do it. They hung infants about the necks and rifled the houses and slew them that circumcised them. This is hell on earth, folks. Howbeit many in Israel were fully resolved and confirmed in themselves to not eat anything unclean. We may think, even to ourselves, that our diet is just a choice. We're just doing it because of the Torah or whatever. But these folks did it to death. They would not eat pork. They wouldn't do it to the point of being murdered. So it's not a small thing. It's a big thing. It's an important thing. They would rather die that they might not be defiled with meats, that they might not profane the holy covenant. So they died. And there was a very great wrath upon Israel. Chapter 2. I wonder where that... Woof. I'm flying through my notes. In those days arose Mattathias, the son of John, the son of Simeon, a priest from the sons of Joarib from Jerusalem, and dwelt in Modin. And he had 5 sons, Jonathan called Caddis, Simon called Thassi, Judas who was called Maccabeus, Eleazar called Avaran, and Jonathan whose surname was Apphus. And when he saw the blasphemies that were committed in Judah and Jerusalem, he said, Woe is me, wherefore I was born to see this misery of my people and of the holy city to dwell there. And then it was delivered into the hand of the enemy, and the sanctuary into the hand of strangers. Notice these guys have Greek names, and they have Hebrew names. So that 137, 145 years, the culture does take you over. But also notice, they don't care that they have Greek names. Same as with the authors of the New Testament. A lot of times people get into our walk and get a level of purity that didn't exist in the first century, that we can't, use the Greek names or use the English names. We sure can, and it's okay. These are the heroes of Jerusalem, and they're still using their Greek names. So it seems to me that it would be a pretty strong example that it's okay for us to say God and Yahweh and Yeshua and Jesus, all however we see fit. Her temple has become as a man without glory. Her glorious vessels are carried away into captivity. Her infants are slain in the streets, her young men with the sword of the enemy. What nation has not had a part in her kingdom and gotten of her spoils? Meaning that they took the stuff from Jerusalem and spread it around the world. All her ornaments are taken away. Of a free woman she has become a bondslave. And behold, our sanctuary, even our beauty and glory, is laid waste, and the Gentiles have profaned it. To what end, therefore, shall we live any longer? Then Mattathias and his sons rent their clothes and put on sackcloth and mourned very sore. In the meanwhile, the king's officers, such as compelled the people to revolt, came to the city of Modin to make them sacrifice. And when many of Israel came unto them, Mattathias also and his sons came together. Then answered the king's officers and said to Mattathias on this wise, Thou art a ruler, and an honorable and great man in this city, and strengthened with sons and brethren. Now, therefore, come thou first, and fulfill the king's commandment, like as all the heathen have done, yea, all the men of Judah also, as such as remain at Jerusalem. So shalt thou, so you will too, and your house be in the number of the king's friends. You and your children shall be honored with silver and gold and many rewards. See this? See how this deception? Do you see how they have the same playbook? You just come on our way, follow our laws, forsake your gods. Come on in. The water's fine. Just bow the knee to Antiochus Epiphanes. Just bow the knee to our gods. Everything's going to be fine. Wasn't true for a minute. Was not true for a second. They would have done the deed, turned around and got killed out back behind the barn. They just wanted a moment to show that they were in charge. And so Mattathias answered and spoke with a loud voice, though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him and fall away every one from the religion of their fathers and give consent to his commandments, yet I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers. God forbid that we should forsake the law and the ordinance. We will not hearken to the king's words to go from our religion, either on the right hand or the left. Now, when he had left speaking these words, there came one of the Jews in sight of all to sacrifice on the altar, which was set up as Modine according to the king's commandment. So you understand, the Jews are coming out, they're doing this, and they're going to do it. Here comes the guy. So when Mattathias saw, he was inflamed with zeal, and his reins trembled, probably means veins popped out of his head, and he could not forbear to show his anger according to judgment, wherefore he ran and slew this man upon the altar. And he slew the king's commissioners who compelled men to sacrifice. He killed that guy too. And he pulled the altar down. He went full Gideon and Phinehas. Thus he dealt zealously for the Torah, like as Phinehas did unto Zambri the son of Salom. So yeah, just like Phinehas, right? And Mattathias cried throughout the city with a loud voice, saying, whoever is zealous of the law and maintained the covenant, let him follow me. So he and his sons fled into the mountains and left all that they had in the city. Does that sound familiar? Isn't that what Yeshua is saying? You're going to have to flee Judea. You're going to have to go to the mountains. And if you go back to get stuff, you're going to get killed. These things had happened before. He was warning them about AD 70 and about the end of days by quoting something that had happened prior. Then many that sought after justice and judgment went down into the wilderness to dwell there. Do you see what good leadership can do? There's good leadership. And when you beat people down to the point that they have nothing left to lose, they will look for a way to win. Both they and their children and their wives and their cattle, because afflictions increased sore upon them. Now, when it was told the king's servants and the host that was at Jerusalem in the city of David, that certain men who had broken the king's commandment were gone down into the secret places in the wilderness, they pursued after them a great number. Having overtaken them, they camped against them and made war against them on the Sabbath day. And they said unto them, let that which ye have done hitherto suffice. I'm going to start speaking with a British accent here in a minute. Come forth and do the commandment of the king, and you shall live. But they said, we will not come forth, neither will we do the king's commandment to profane the Sabbath day. So then they gave them battle with all speed. Howbeit they answered them not, meaning they didn't fight back. They didn't fight back because it was the Sabbath. They said, we're going to die innocent. Heaven and earth will testify for us that they put us to death wrongfully. Martyrdom is noble. So they rose up against them in battle on the Sabbath and slew them and their wives and their children and their cattle to the number of 1,000 people. So when Yeshua said, pray that your flight not be on Sabbath, he meant it. This is the direct reference that he's making right here. So when Mattathias and his friends understood, they mourned right sore. And one of them said to another, if we do as our brethren have done and fight and don't fight on the Sabbath, they're going to kill us. At that time, they decreed, whoever shall come and make battle with us on the Sabbath day, we will fight. Oh, question. Monty Python. So, there came to a company of Assyrians, who were mighty men of Israel, even all such as were voluntarily devoted to Torah. Also, all that had fled for persecution joined themselves unto them. So here we go. Here we go. The rebellion starts. They slew some Greeks. No going back from that. They got attacked on the Sabbath day. They learned their lesson that they're going to have to fight back on the Sabbath. They're going to rest, but if they get attacked on Sabbath, they're going to go fight back. And now they start picking up some people. They start picking up some people for the revolution. They joined forces and they smote sinful men in their anger and wicked men in their wrath. but the rest fled to the heathen for succor, for safety. Then Mattathias and his friends went round about and pulled down the altars. And what children they found within the coast of Israel, within the borders of Israel, uncircumcised, they circumcised them valiantly. I don't know how you do that valiantly, but they circumcised all the kids. They had nothing to lose, and they trusted that Yahweh was going to deliver them. They pursued after also the proud men and the proud men, the people who were doing the Greekifying Hellenistic practices. They went after them, and the work prospered in their hand. So they recovered the Torah out of the hand of the Gentiles, out of the hand of kings. Neither suffered they the sinner nor the triumph. When that time drew near that Mattathias should die, he said unto his sons, now hath pride and rebuke gotten strength in the time of destruction and the wrath of indignation. Therefore, my sons, be zealous for Torah, and give your lives for the covenant of your fathers. Call to remembrance what acts our fathers did in their time, and so shall ye receive great honor and an everlasting name. Was not Abraham found faithful in temptation, and it was imputed unto him for righteousness? Joseph, in the time of his distress, kept the commandment and was made Lord of Egypt. Phinehas, our father, in being zealous and fervent, obtained the covenant of an everlasting priesthood. Joshua, for fulfilling the words, was made a judge in Israel. Caleb, for bearing witness before the congregation, received the heritage of the land. David, for being merciful, possessed the throne of an everlasting kingdom. Elias, being zealous and fervent for the Torah, was taken up into heaven. Elijah. Ananias, Azarias, and Mishael, by believing, were saved out of the flame. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego apparently have Greek names too. Daniel, for his innocency, was delivered from the mouth of lions. And thus consider ye throughout all ages that none that put their trust in him shall be overcome. Fear not the words of a sinful man, for his glory shall be dung and words. So understand that when the apostles were following Yeshua, they thought they were going to go to win a physical battle, even at the end when Peter pulls out the sword. But that wasn't what was going to happen. They were going to go and preach the gospel to the nations. But you can understand now why all the people thought that Yeshua was coming to do this, to push the Romans out and to restore Israel to its former glory. Today he shall be lifted up, and tomorrow he shall not be found, because he is returned to the dust, and his thought is come to nothing. Those are the words of the sinful man. Wherefore, my sons, be valiant and show yourselves men in behalf of Torah, for by it shall ye obtain glory. Being men, if we goes on here later, I think we get to it in this study, where it talks about the manliness of the Judeans, that their boldness, their bravery, their willingness to go into battle, their masculinity was a blessing, and that put the fear in the rest of the nations that they destroyed. Who has been at war with masculinity for the last 60 years? Why do you think our nation is incapable of changing a tire? Right? Don't change your tire. Just wait there for AAA to come and get you. Right? We've been, as one example of us being emasculated, even to the point of now allowing men to pretend to be women in order to win some trophy in swimming or basketball or something. But masculinity is important to Yahweh. He made us men and women. That doesn't mean that being feminine is bad by any stretch of the imagination, but he wants the ladies to be feminine and he wants the men to be masculine. He's designed us for a purpose. And behold, I know that your brother Simon is a man of counsel. Give ear to him always, and he shall be a father unto you. As for Judas Maccabeus, he hath been mighty and strong, even from his youth up. Let him be your captain, and fight the battle of the people. Take also unto you all those that observe Torah, and avenge the wrong of your people. Recompense fully the heathen, and take heed the Torah, mitzvot. So he blessed them, and he was gathered to his fathers, and he died in the 146th year and his sons buried him in the sepulchres of his fathers at Modin, and all Israel made a great lamentation for him. The battle rolls on. Chapter 3. I don't have a lot of notes on chapter 3. I should probably just go through it pretty quickly, but we're going to read it because this is seldom read stuff. Okay. So then his son Judas, called Maccabeus, the hammer, rose up in his stead, and all his brethren helped him. And so did all they that held with his father, and they fought with cheerfulness the battle of Israel. So he got his people great honor and put on a breastplate as a giant and girt his warlike harness about him, and he made battles, protecting the host with his sword. In his acts he was like a lion, and like a lion's whelp roaring for his prey. For he pursued the wicked and sought them out, and burnt up those that vexed his people. Wherefore the wicked shrunk fear before him, and all the workers of iniquity were troubled, because salvation prospered in his hand. Those who work iniquity were troubled. Pretty appropriate theme there. He grieved also many kings, means that he made the kings sorry, and he made Jacob glad with his acts, Jacob Israel, and his memorial is blessed forever. Moreover, he went through the cities of Judah, destroying the ungodly out of them and turning away wrath from Israel, so that he was renowned unto the utmost part of the earth, and he received unto him such as were ready to perish. Then Apollonius gathered the Gentiles together, a great host out of Samaria, to fight against Israel. Which thing, when Judas perceived, he went forth to meet him, and he smote him, and slew him. And many also fell down slain, but the rest fled. Wherefore Judas took their spoils, and Apollonius' sword also. So he put on the breastplate of a giant, and now he's got the bad guy's sword. Very reminiscent of King David. Now when Saron, the prince of the army of Syria, heard say that Judas had gathered unto him a multitude and a company of faithful to go out with him to war, he said, I'm going to get a name. I'm going to go make a name for myself. I'm going to go fight Judas and all that are with him who despise the king's commandment. So he made himself ready to go up. And there he went, the mighty host of the ungodly, to help him. Are you guys seeing in your head right now how Satan is going to gather the armies of the nations against Jerusalem in the end of this era? At the end of this 1,000 years even. That the nations are going to go up to war against Jerusalem. That is exactly what is happening right here. So he made him ready to go up in the mighty host of the ungodly. And when he came near to the going up of Beth Horon, Judas went forth to meet him with a small company, who, when they saw the host coming to meet them, said unto Judas, how will we be able, so few, to fight against so great a multitude and so strong, seeing that we are ready to faint with fasting all this day? Unto whom Judas answered, it is no hard matter for many to be shut up in the hands of a few. With the God of heaven, it is all one to deliver with a great multitude or a small company. Talking about Gideon here. For the victory of battle stands not in the multitude of a host, but in the strength that comes from heaven. They come against us in much pride and iniquity to destroy us and our wives and our children, to despoil us. But we fight for our lives on Torah and our laws. Wherefore the Lord himself will overthrow them before our face. As for you, do not be afraid of them. As soon as he had left off speaking, he leapt suddenly upon them, and so Saron and his host were overthrown before them. And they pursued them from the going down of Beth Horon unto the plain, where were slain about 800 men of them, and they residue fled into the land of the Philistines. Then began the fear of Judas and his brethren, and an exceedingly great dread fall upon the nations around them, insomuch as his fame came unto the king, and all nations talked of the battles of Judas. When Antiochus heard these things, he was full of indignation. He doesn't want this happening. He doesn't want these nations to start fighting against him. He wants to be a totalitarian dictator. So he sent and gathered together all the forces of his realm, very strong army, and he opened his treasure and gave his soldiers pay for a year, commanding them to be ready whenever he should need them. He paid his people in advance. He bought their loyalty. Nevertheless, when he saw that the money of his treasures failed and that the tributes in the country were small because of the dissension and the plague, which he had brought upon the land and taking away the laws of old time, he was foisted on his own petard here. He went and destroyed the agricultural Torah of Israel, the laws of Israel. Nobody's tending the fields. Nobody's tending the sheep. There is no blessing on the land. Therefore, there are no taxes to excise. They've already taken all the gold and despoiled the temple. There's nothing left. He made the place a desolation, and now he can't get paid back for his invasion. So, he feared that he should not be able to bear the charges any longer, nor have such gifts to give liberally as he did before, for he abounded above the kings that were before him. He spent it all on conquest. Therefore, being greatly perplexed in his mind, he determined to go into Persia to take the tributes of the countries and to gather much money. So he left Lysias, a nobleman, one of the blood royal, to oversee the affairs of the king from the river Euphrates and to the borders of Egypt. From the river into the sea, sound familiar? And to bring up his son Antiochus until he came again. Moreover, he delivered unto him half the forces, the elephants, gave him charge of all the things that he would have done, and also concerning them that dwelt in Judah and Jerusalem. To wit, he should send an army against them to destroy and root out the strength of Israel, the remnant of Jerusalem, and to take away their memorial from that place, that he should place strangers in their quarters and divide their land by lot. So the king took half the forces that remained and departed from Antioch, his royal city. The 147th year, having passed the river Euphrates, went through the high countries. Then Lysias chose Ptolemy, the son of Dorymenes, Nicanor, and Gorgias, the mighty men of his king's friends, and with them sent 40,000 footmen, 7,000 horsemen to go into the land of Judah to destroy it as the king commanded. So they went forth with all power, and came and pinched by Emmaus in the plain country, and the merchants of the country, hearing the fame of them, took silver and gold very much with servants, and came into the camp to buy the children of Israel for slaves. A power also of Syria in the land of the Philistines. So this is curious here. That's water, by the way. The Judas Maccabeus and his rebels have purged Judea largely of the Greeks, and they're winning all the battles. And these people don't like the Jews so much that they're coming into the camp of this big battle, placing their bets. They brought their silver and their gold because when they are assuming that this group is going to win, and they get to buy the Israelites as slaves. They want that this wickedness is crazy. So when Judas and his brethren saw that miseries were multiplied and that the forces did encamp themselves in their borders, for they knew how the king had given commandment to destroy the people and utterly abolish them, they said to one another, let us restore the decayed fortune of our people. Let us fight for our people in the sanctuary. Then was the congregation gathered together that they might be ready for battle, that they might pray and ask mercy and compassion. Jerusalem lay void as a wilderness. There was none of her children that went in or out. The sanctuary was trodden down, and aliens kept the stronghold. The heathen had their habitation in that place, and the joy was taken for Jacob, and the pipe with the harp ceased. Wherefore the Israelites assembled themselves together and came to Mashpah over against Jerusalem, for in Mashpah, or Maspah, was the place where they prayed aforetime in Israel. Then they fasted that day and put on sackcloth and cast ashes upon their heads and rent their clothes, and laid open the Torah, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images. They went, opened the book of the law, where the heathen had painted those pagan images. They brought up also the priest's garments and the first fruits and the tithes, and the Nazarites they stirred up who had accomplished their days. They cried with a loud voice toward heaven and said, what do we do with these, whither we carry them away? For your sanctuary is trodden down and profaned. Your priests are in heaviness and brought low. The heathen are assembled together against us to destroy us. What things they may imagine against us, thou knowest. Meaning what they plan to do to us when it's over, only you know, God. How shall we be able to stand against them, except you, O God, be our help? And they cried, they sounded with trumpets, cried with a loud voice. After this, Judas ordained captains over the people, even captains over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. But as for such as were building houses and betrothed wives, or were planting vineyards, or were fearful, those he commanded that they should return every man to his own house according to the Torah. This is a very good point here. They're about to lose it all. And the temptation is to go all in. Their temptation is to suspend the law and say, everybody fight. They didn't do that. They followed the ways of old. They followed the Torah. They said, if you're newlywed, you're building a house, you're terrified, you don't have to go, because that's what Torah says. They were blessed in their obedience. So the camp removed and pitched on the south side of Emmaus, and Judas said, arm yourselves and be valiant, men, and see that you be in readiness against the morning, that you may fight against these nations that are assembled together against us to destroy us and our sanctuary. For it is better for us to die in battle than to behold the calamities of our people and our sanctuary. Nevertheless, as the will of God in heaven, let him do so. We'll be done at this chapter, okay? It's been a while. Not so bad, 40 minutes. So then took Gorgias 5,000 footmen and 1,000 best horsemen and removed them out of the camp by night, to the end he might rush in upon the camp of the Jews and smite them suddenly. And the men of the fortress were his guides. Meaning the heathen that were in the fortress were showing them how to come in. When Judas heard thereof, he himself removed, and the valiant men with him, and he went that he might smite the king's army, which was at Emmaus, while as yet the forces were dispersed from the camp. In the meanwhile, came Gorgias by night into the camp of Judas. When he found nobody there, he sought them in the mountains, for he said, well, these fellows flee from us. But as soon as it was day, Judas showed himself in the plain with 3,000 men, who nevertheless had neither armor nor swords to their minds. And they saw the camp of the heathen, that it was strong and well harnessed and compassed around with horsemen. These were experts of war. Then said Judas to the men that were with him, fear ye not their multitude, neither be ye afraid of their assault. Remember how our fathers were delivered in the Red Sea when Pharaoh pursued them with an army. Now therefore let us cry unto heaven, if peradventure the Lord will have mercy upon us, and remember the covenant of our fathers, and destroy this host before us this day. That so all the heathen may know that there is one who delivers and saves Israel. Then the strangers lifted up their eyes and saw them coming over against them. Wherefore they went out of the camp to battle, but they that were with Judas sounded their trumpets. So they joined in battle, and the heathen, being discomfited, fled into the plain. Howbeit, all the hindmost of them were slain with the sword, for they pursued them into Gezerah, into the plains of Idumea, Azotus, and Yamania, that there were slain upon them 3,000 men. So 10 men put 1,000 to flight. Right? Just like the days of old. This done, Judas returned again with his host from pursuing them, and said to the people, be not greedy of the spoil, inasmuch there's a battle before us. Meaning, don't go grab all the loot. We still have to fight. We can't take the loot and go home now. We're still fighting. Gorgias and his host are here by us in the mountain, but stand now against our enemies and overcome them, and after this, you come back and get the spoils. As Judas was speaking these words, there appeared a part of them looking out of the mountain, who, when they perceived that the Jews had put their host to flight and were burning the tents, for the smoke was seen, declared what was done. When therefore they perceived these things, they were sore afraid, and also seeing also the host of Judas in the plain ready to fight, they fled every one into the land of the strangers. Then Judas returned the spoil to the tents, where they got much gold and silver and blue silk and the purple of the sea and great riches. After this, they went home and sung a song of thanksgiving and praised Yahweh in heaven, because it is good, because his mercy endures forever. Thus Israel had a great deliverance that day. Now all the strangers that had escaped come and told Lysias what had happened, who, when he heard thereof, was confounded and discouraged, because neither such things as he would were done into Israel, nor such thing as the kings commanded would come to pass. The next year, therefore, following Lysias, gathered together 70,000 choice men of foot and 5,000 horsemen that he might subdue them. So they came into Idumea and pitched their tents at Bethsura, and Judas met them with 10,000 men. He still isn't giving them any any respect. And we saw that mighty army and prayed, said, Blessed art thou, Savior of Israel, who did quell the violence of the mighty man by the hand of thy servant David, and gavest the host of strangers into the hand of Jonathan, the son of Saul, and his armor bearer. Shut up this army in the hands of thy people Israel, let them be confounded in their power and their horsemen. Make them be of no courage, and cause the boldness of their strength to fall away, and let them quake at their destruction. Cast them down with the sword. Cast them down with the sword of them that love thee, meaning let us kill them, and let all those that know thy name praise thee with thanksgiving. So they joined to battle. There were slain of the host of Lysias about 5,000 men. Even before them they were slain. Now when Lysias saw his army put to flight, and the manliness of Judas's soldiers, and how they were ready either to live or die valiantly, he went into Antiochia, gathered together a company of strangers, having made his army greater than it was, and he purposed to come again into Judea. Then said Judas and his brethren, Behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go to cleanse and dedicate our sanctuary. Upon this, all the host assembled them together and went up to Mount Zion. When they saw the sanctuary desolate, the altar profaned, and the gates burned up, and shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest or in one of the mountains, yea, the priests' chambers pulled down, they rent their clothes and made great lamentation and cast ashes upon their heads, fell down flat to the ground upon their faces, and blew an alarm with the trumpets and cried unto heaven. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he had cleansed the sanctuary. So he chose priests, of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in Torah, who cleansed the sanctuary and bare out the defiled stones into a unclean place. And when they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profaned, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down, and laid up stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place, until there should come a prophet to show them what to be done with them. This is another key point here, is a contrast to King Saul. When King Saul called an audible, he decided he was going to do something that Samuel told him not to do. King Saul lost his kingship, even though he'd won a great battle. These guys have been winning battles now for like a year and a half. They are really powerful. They have all the authority, and they realize that they don't know what to do with the profaned stones of the altar. You can't use them. You can't touch them. What are you going to do with it? And they say, well, we better wait for a prophet to show us what to be done. This is a good moment of humility here. So they took whole stones according to the Torah and built a new altar according to the former, made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple, and hallowed the courts. They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick, the menorah, and the altar of burnt offerings and of the incense and table. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lit, that they might give light in the temple. They just lit the menorah. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out the veils and finished all the works that they had begun to make. Now on the 5th and 20th day of the 9th month, which is called Caslev, in the 148th year, they rose up at times in the morning. You notice this is almost exactly the day that all this stuff started, and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it, even to that it was dedicated with songs and harps and cymbals. So you see how it comes full circle, that they were smote, and the abomination of desolation starts on this one day in time, and they go through the entire cycle, and they restore Judea to what it was before the people started compromising. There's no compromising going on in Judea anymore. They are now following Torah, worshiping Yahweh, and that is that. And they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days and offered burnt offerings with gladness and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. It's Hanukkah, dedication. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed and hanged doors upon them. Thus there were very great gladness among the people, for that reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren and the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month Caslev, with mirth and gladness. At that time also they builded up upon the Mount Zion high walls, strong towers round about, lest the Gentiles should come and tread it down as they had done before. And they also set up a garrison and fortified Bethsura to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against Idumea. So you understand, when Yeshua is in the temple on Hanukkah, and they say, tell us plainly who you are. They were looking for him to do this. This is the expectation, that a very small remnant of faithful Torah observant Jews were going to have a king Messiah lead them in battle to push the Romans out. But his mission wasn't to do that. In fact, he warned them and said, not one stone of this temple will be left upon another. This place is coming down again. And it was worse. I reckon the third time, right? Because there was the Babylonian captivity, the Grecian occupation, then the Roman desolation. And he says it's going to get worse, and you guys are going to get scattered. But then he talks about the end of days. What happens at the end of days? The temple not made with hands comes down from heaven, and Yeshua is the king upon Mount Zion. And then we're going to have a smiting like has never been before. This is where I wanted to stop. A little less than an hour. Thank you for listening to me read the Maccabees to you. But this is the story of Hanukkah, the real story of it. Now, the rest of this book, it goes on. It's great stuff, great histories. It even shows you why Rome was occupying. Because at the end of all of the conquests, when they've really purged the entire land, there's a couple of verses where it says where a man sits under his own tree and doesn't have to worry about other people eating stuff that he planted. It talks about these peaceful things. They send a tribute to Rome. When Rome was a big power far, far away, they made a covenant with Rome, which ultimately invited Rome into the place, and which is why Rome occupies, one of the reasons why Rome occupies Judea in the 1st century. But now you know the story of Hanukkah, and you know how they celebrated it. They celebrated it 8 days like Feast of Sukkot in the wintertime to celebrate the cleansing of the temple and the restoration of Torah and righteousness to the land of Judea. Thanks.